Hello? Looking? Hello, hello. So just a quick few things I have to go over before I introduce the guest. In case of a fire, the meeting point is just outside of Metronome on Brook Street. So if there is one, then that is where we'll go. There's still prizes to be given out for anyone that, for somebody that tweets out Industry Week, hashtag IW23 on Twitter. They're giving out some prizes, so if you get some images of anything, just put it on Twitter with the hashtag, and you might win a prize. I'm not going to do too much of an introduction because you can introduce yourself anyway, but I hope everyone's had a good Industry Week so far and continues to have one. Tomorrow is the final day, make sure you go to as much stuff as possible, and that's it.
Cool, thank you. Are we on? Yeah, cool. So, I am Aran. Surname is spelt wrong. Don't worry about that, it's got an I in it instead of an E. So, I am a junior sound designer at Dambuster Studios, and before that I was a QA tester, also at Dambuster. And then before then, I was a student at Confetti. I spent 5 long years here. So, just quickly, before I go into anything, is anybody here wanting to get into sound design? Okay, that's a few hands. I don't want to like false advertise anything. This is more to do with getting into the games industry in general than it is to do with being specifically a sound designer. I'm still happy to like discuss sound design, especially at the end with like the Q&A and stuff. But most of this, I'm going to be using this time to just kind of discuss how I went from Confetti to the games industry. So, in this presentation, I'm just going to cover a few things. So the main thing is like what you should be doing right now, you know, while you're students, what you can be doing in the moment, because there is a lot. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to need to do. Also, again, things you can leave university with. Is anybody here in the college level at all? Okay, cool. Again, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about with the college side of things, but this should still apply, so don't worry too much about that. And then applying for jobs and a portfolio and resume breakdown where I'll go over my work and show off what I've done. Hopefully use that as a baseline, shall we say, very bottom baseline for what you can get away with. So, the beginning, I had no formal background in games. I was a musician, that was my thing. I really, really wanted to do music in college. And so when I finished my GCSEs and basically failed all of them, Confetti accepted me, which was cool. I went onto I think it was a music performance course, and about a week or two before I was meant to start, I realized, I don't think I can do this. I've got really bad anxiety. I can't do this. So then I just kind of stopped that idea, killed that off. A couple of weeks later, when the academic term was starting, I had managed to switch to the games course. And that was history, you know, that was the kind of beginning. And I've always been a gamer as well. I'm massively into first-person shooters. That was my main thing, still is. That's kind of important now because the stuff that I do work on is mostly first-person and mostly shooters. So that's kind of come full circle. And also like pathways and like transitioning into university, that was a big thing as well, was I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was on those first 2 years at college. I didn't necessarily want to be a sound designer. Like 3D modeling was my thing. It still kind of is. I really love 3D, but here I am as a sound designer. So for those of you in college, don't worry too much if you're not 100% sure on what you want to do right now in the moment. You know, it's a good thing to use to like figure that out, but if you can't, there's not too much pressure, you know. And then we get to second year of university, and at this point I decided I wanted to fully commit to sound design. First year there wasn't a lot going on. Again, stayed focusing on 3D modeling, that was my sort of main thing. But I had an assessment in second year of college that was on sound design for games, and that kind of planted the seed, and I started like researching it, started learning about it, started finding out different sound designers for video games. Like the main one that I learned about was Mick Gordon, who did Doom, for those of you who know, and he became like a massive inspiration for me in terms of my style that I do, and also just as, you know, being a sound designer on a really awesome game. So at that point in the second year, I kind of dropped the whole 3D side of things and I started focusing on sound design specific portfolio, and this is really important. So when you're in university, you have this kind of like this long 2-3 year period where you can work on stuff, but so many people don't and like my classmates weren't really working on stuff for their portfolio. They were doing stuff for the course, which is fine, and that's good. You should be doing coursework, but at the same time, you should be using your coursework as a portfolio piece. And so I realized, well, there's no sound design on the games production course. That's not a module. So I had to figure out what to do. And what ended up happening, I'll come back to this slide in a minute, but I ended up going on to do group projects in second year. Now, as I've been informed by Yven earlier today, there aren't group projects on the games course anymore, which is a shame because I think they're really important when people work well together, that is. I learned the hard way that they don't always go to plan, but that's really important because in the industry, it's just a massive group project. Like at the end of the day, the games industry, like a AAA studio like I'm at, you've got 180, 200 people, and it's just a massive group project. So kind of consider if you have a chance to work on a group project like I did, you definitely should. And if you don't, then coming back to that previous slide, you've got a few options. So one of them is doing game jams. They are tedious for the most part, but I highly recommend, now, just starting from like right now, do game jams if you haven't. And what a game jam is, for those of you who don't know, is it's a really short project where you team up with either your friends or some random people. It doesn't necessarily have to be anybody in particular. It's a great way of meeting new people. And you basically get a brief from wherever the game jam is being published on, and a bunch of people, usually hundreds, maybe thousands of teams, depending on the scale, compete and have to make a game within a certain time. And they're fun. At the end of the day, it's just meant to be a laugh. You're not really supposed to come up with something that's incredible and the best game ever. It's just meant to be a laugh. And again, you make some great connections by doing it. You meet new people if you can branch out and you can find a team. And what's really important as a sound designer is nobody else really does it. And games need sound. It's as simple as that. So if you're a musician, especially, you've kind of got a massive advantage there, and you're easily going to be able to find a group to do it with because so many people really need sound designers and musicians. So I don't actually have any of my game jam stuff with me today on the slide, which is a bit of an oversight, but you're not missing out on anything, don't worry. So another thing to consider as well, I was considering equipment that I could be using. So Confetti have a bunch of equipment that you can use, you can book out. One of the really cool tools I've got is a field recorder. I'm sure some of you know what those are. I ended up buying my own because I didn't really want to have to book one out every time I wanted to use one. I just wanted one that I could have on me at all times if I needed it. So I got a little Tascam, cheap eBay, field recorder and a microphone, and that was kind of when I got to work on this sort of stuff. I properly committed to it. And so what I would say, if you really are wanting to go into games and do sound in games, get a field recorder, get a microphone. Most field recorders have microphones built in, but it does help to have a nice microphone, and start learning how to use equipment, so software-wise. So Unreal Engine is incredibly important. Most studios are using Unreal, or at least a custom kind of integration of it. So it's so valuable. And because I have this Confetti background, right, where I was studying games production and I had the kind of background from using game engines for 5 or so years, when I moved over to Dambuster and started as a sound designer, I immediately had a bunch of knowledge on how to program for that specific engine that most people there don't have. Not to say that you have to have it. You don't have to have game engine knowledge, but it's really, really useful to have. And again, if you do game jams, you're kind of having to learn how to do that sort of stuff anyways. You're going to be learning how to use engines. So consider doing game jams. I promise they're really valuable. They're also a great thing to talk about in interviews. If you're in an interview for a game job, they can talk about your projects and stuff. You can then slip that in and be like, well, I do game jams. Put that on your cover letter. It's a really cool thing to show that you can do that. It shows that you're interested in the game industry, and it shows that you're really passionate about it. Not just saying, oh, I'm passionate, but you're actually showing that you are passionate about it. So I found when I was doing my group project, in fact, I'll just show it. I'll play the video. Hopefully this works and you can all hear it. This one's going to come out a bit quiet, I think. So that was one of the first projects I did sound design for, and I mean, it's not great. It did the trick, but this was, again, second year when I was learning how to do this sort of stuff. I frankly think some stuff went right, but there was a lot of stuff that went wrong. So for me, and we'll come on to this later in a bit more detail, but it was massively lacking in style and identity. Again, just to kind of roll back a little bit, when I learnt about Mick Gordon and Doom, and that sort of style of sound design, that really visceral, heavy, just in-your-face, punchy first-person sound design, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And just like when you're a musician and you're working with like genres of music, right, it's kind of tedious to do something that you don't really want to do or something that you're not comfortable with. And the music as well, I did that kind of like lo-fi piano stuff. And to be honest, that's not me. That's not what I do at all. So it was a learning process. And I wasn't super happy with the result, but again, it's a portfolio piece. It's something that you can show. And so another thing with group projects, as I've said, is there can be a communication breakdown sometimes. It happens, but it is on you guys to just make it work. You know, you need to communicate with each other. You need to be clear with each other what you're doing and just discuss stuff. One thing that was like massive, like with a communication breakdown with us, with our group project, I think there was 7 or 8 people on that, was that people weren't keeping to like the sort of the milestones, like we weren't keeping on schedule. So half of the stuff was ready when the other half wasn't, and it was difficult to get it all in because it just wasn't ready. So try to keep on top of your time management and be just on it with communication, and that's going to go a long way. And similarly with game jams, you're going to have to communicate, and it's going to be even in an even shorter window of time. You're going to be, you know, with that person for 24, 48 hours is the usual length, so you need to make sure that you're just communicating. It's basic stuff, but it does go a long way. And also limited flexibility, kind of coming back to that as well. I just didn't have the flexibility to do my own style. And so just quickly in regards to that as well, offline networking, talk to your classmates. Game jams are, again, a really good way, and group projects are a really good way of doing this, but just communicating with your classmates and getting to know them, not necessarily treating it as like try-hard networking where it's like really formal or anything, just put yourself out there and talk to people because they may end up being connections in the future. And that did end up happening for me, which I'll discuss in a little bit, but one of the reasons I'm in the industry right now is because one of my classmates that I worked with on that previous project and all of the rest of the projects got a job before me and referred me. So we moved to third year of university now, fully single, no group projects at all, and I'm just continuing to work on my portfolio, which I'll show in a second. I was constantly doing audio redesigns, so something that is like the sort of standard in the industry for sound design in games is doing short reels where you take gameplay footage. Specifically with games, you take gameplay footage, but if you're in kind of one that's going to film, for example, you could get clips of a film, and you essentially strip the audio and put your own over it. A good little trick that I actually learned that made me improve with redesigns was actually stripping the audio away before you start listening to it, so don't get comfortable with how the game sounds. And then, I know that's kind of like difficult to do if you've already played the game, but just try not to get comfortable with what you're working on so that you put yourself into a situation where you have to try something different. You know, try not to make it sound exactly the same. Like that isn't your objective. And as a sound designer in the industry, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to clone other people's stuff. I am trying to make my own unique touch, my own style. So be mindful of that, especially when you're doing redesigns, because I have seen a lot of people's portfolios that are just rehashes. It's just kind of like copy-pasted of other people's work. Not in a literal sense, but it just sounds very similar. And so I was also developing and leaning into a style at this point. This was when I'd fully committed to sound design, and I was now saying, I'm not doing that project again with a lo-fi song and, you know, top-down, like really basic sound design. I want to do something that is punchy and in your face and just kind of crazy and first person and loud. So in third year, I started tailoring my portfolio work to do just that. The main one was the game engines project that I had. For those of you guys that are doing like music and stuff, that isn't really an option for you, but again, it's a good reason to learn to use engines, because if games is where you want to go, you need to know how to just like work with that sort of stuff. So I had decided, okay, I'm going to make a basic game, really simple, no assets other than like the basic things and some simple stuff. And I'm going to stick a really cool song in it, but I'm going to make the song dynamic. So I'm going to make this song progressively change instrumentation as you progress through the game. And it came out really bad, if I'm honest. It really wasn't a good project, but what was good is I was pushing myself to try new stuff, and I was using a piece of software called Wise. It's spelt with two W's, like Wise, but the first one's silent for whatever reason. And that's industry standard, and that's what we use. It's a middleware, so you put your audio into that, and then that is linked with the game engine. I won't go into too much detail right now about that, but if any of you do have any questions about Wise and that kind of workflow, you know, feel free to ask afterwards. But I put myself in a situation where I wanted to use that rather than using the default engine, so that I would be, again, just forcing myself out of my comfort zone, trying something unique. And it came out bad, again, but it did what I wanted it to do, and it served as an okay portfolio piece. And then another thing that is really overrated, even underrated, apologies, is when you write a resume, you have the NTUs, or for at least the uni level side of things, you have the NTU employability team. And I just want to shout those guys out as well, because if you don't know how to write a resume or a CV or anything like that, or a cover letter, they're there to help. And those guys are like incredible. You know, they were there when I needed them, and they did a wonderful job with guiding me on how to properly write this sort of stuff. And I was quickly realizing, like, with each job I applied for, that I didn't have to change much because it was already kind of done. So if you can get your resume and all that sort of stuff out the way when you're in third year, or at least as a basis, then, you know, you're in a really good situation. So ignore the very handsome man on the screen, or don't. I'm just going to play this clip. And this is a clip from a game that I worked on in third year, but it was a group project, or it was a kind of two-person project. This wasn't for university. This was just me and a mate, the same guy who referred me later on. So this is why I'm stressing the importance of group projects, you know, and I'm sort of stressing where if you are a musician or sound designer, put yourself with people that are good with game engines and good with like modeling and stuff. Maybe not to this standard, but, you know, put yourself in a good situation for that, because you are really incredibly useful. So with this clip, I did all the sound design in it, and it was a bit better than the last one, shall we say.
There's no bonuses for delayed game.
Apologies about the levels on that. I hadn't quite got to grips with mastering or mixing at that point. So, but as you can see, it's a little bit better in terms of like the content that's in it, and especially the music. And again, I was just trying new stuff, trying different stuff, and I think that kind of music is a bit closer to what I am comfortable with. And so I was still out of my comfort zone, but it was a bit more familiar for me. And so it was this nice balance where I was doing something that was not necessarily what I wanted to do, but it was still, you know, beneficial in the sense of it's a portfolio piece. And the main thing is it's a learning experience. It wasn't amazing, but this is the thing, is if you work with people that do the rest of it, so in this case, his name's Dan, he did all of the modeling and all of the programming and everything. I literally just stuck some music in it and some sounds. Then you've got yourself an entire playable game as a portfolio, which is massive. That's what people want to see. So with this project, I was starting to improve, and my engine implementation skills were definitely, they were better, but they were still lacking. I wanted to I suppose I wanted to like learn a bit more about doing like dynamic music, as I mentioned earlier. So that's where the music, it depends on how you sort of you implement it, but it's either where the music can have more layers adding to it as like something progresses, like as a parameter changes, or you can just have like kind of blocks of music that will change. And with this, I had a little bit of that in it, and I was learning how to do that. So like the start and the end of the music are like perfectly trimmed on the beat, rather than just kind of cutting off or fading. So learning about how you can kind of work with sound design and meld that with the engine is really useful. And at the same time as this as well, I just want to clarify, I was still working on the linear portfolio, like all of the redesign stuff, which I'll show now. Now that sort of stuff, I kind of continued working on, if this is going to work, I kind of continued working on this from, I'd probably say, second, like the sort of the start of second year to the end of third year, which is when I kind of stopped doing this, because I was focusing on applying for jobs. So this is maybe nearly 2 years worth of content, or like a year and a half's worth of content. And you'll notice it's quite short. It's only about a minute long. I'm just going to play this now, if I can full screen it. So even though that's only about a minute's worth of content, that was, and still probably is, to be fair, my best work. And that is one of the main things that you need to be doing, is put your best stuff first. That is massively important. You know, first and foremost, you need your best content first. That needs to be the forefront of what is seen. That needs to be like right there, straight away. So coming back to what I said earlier about how when you do redesigns, you should try and strip away the audio first before you kind of like get familiar with it and put your own stuff over. That first clip from Titanfall 2, that was the last one that I worked on, and it was my best one. It was my best one, I think, because even though technically it was my last one and I'd had practiced before at this point, I just started straight without any audio behind it. I'd stripped it all out and just kind of jumped straight in and started just listening to silence and just looking at the video and figuring out what can go over that. And similarly with music, if that's the kind of avenue you want to go down, it's exactly the same. Find a clip from a game or whatever, and just kind of look at that short clip. You know, keep it as reasonable as possible, but look at that clip and just try and figure out what you can do, how you can put your style on this, how you can make your music work over that clip. Now, coming back to kind of developing a style, what you probably noticed straight away on that video was that it's all like first-person shooters. It's like all kind of combat games, like visceral, in-your-face, loud games. And I'd realized that consistency is really important. You know, it's fine to branch out and do other kind of bits and stuff that's a bit less in that style, which is good. It's nice to show that you can do other stuff, but I think when it kind of boils down to it, when you're applying for studios, they want to see your best work, but they also really want to see that you can meet their kind of expectations with your sound design. And it goes for anything, like if it's music or asset production, it needs to kind of match what they're wanting. And so for me, by doing first-person shooters, it like limited it to that kind of very wide, broad spectrum, but it was still a bit more refined than just having random stuff, which is really, I think it's really important to just have your own identity. So with that entire video, I think it's a nice kind of encapsulation of what I do and what I want to do. So keep that in mind. And also, like, I'll come over to the website in a second and just sort of show how I've done it, but when it comes down to sound design, you don't really have any platforms. Like with art, you have ArtStation, which is perfect because it's all integrated into one piece. Everything is there. You can have all your information on it. You can have everything. But with sound design, you don't really have that. Like, you can have a YouTube channel, but it's not really a good way of like presenting yourself because it's just a channel. So for me, I went with Wix and made the most basic website possible. And the reason I did that is because it needs to be really readable. It needs to be easy to read. It would be if I could scroll up. There we go. So super simple. I've got my socials on it, my name, and straight away when I click the link, I landed straight on the video. 2 clicks is ideal if possible. You know, like literally somebody sees this, they see the link, they click it, click play, and then they've heard your work. And again, if you've got the best stuff first, it's like bosh, it's in your face. Like straight away they're going to hear that. And that's going to be, in my opinion, the best way to do it. I like to use Vimeo to host my audio videos because I find that YouTube has got really bad compression and it just sounds terrible most of the time. So Vimeo, I think, is a bit more forgiving with that stuff. So keep that in mind as well, like finding a good platform. And I think with Wix, you might be able to put videos straight in. You might be able to just implement the direct files onto the website, and that might be another option. But I'm literally still on the free Wix. You know, I'm not even paying for this, even though I probably should. But I have a very limited size for files that I can put on, so I can't really upload any videos, unfortunately. And so underneath the video, we have a kind of brief description. I'm not going to ask you to read it, and I'm certainly not going to read it, but like a super brief description of each thing that you're seeing, which corresponds to the kind of the order of the video. And also in the video, you had the little sort of titles that were popping up. I don't go into too much information, but like for example, I talk a little bit about using sound libraries. So I used Boom's Assault Weapons for the Metro clip. I use that for like most of them for like layering and stuff. I also used FabFilter Pro R, which is a reverb. It's like one of my favorite plugin suites, FabFilter. And I used that, and that was kind of the first time I properly used FabFilter. I'd purchased it for the sake of making that. And I think being able to give brief information on what you do and how you've done it, but without being too over the top about it. Like, you don't have to give every detail, but giving little bits of information. Like, so in this case, I'm showing I can use sound libraries, which is really important, and I'm showing I can use industry standard plugins. I'm also slipping in little words like Foley, and there's probably like synthesized, there we go, stuff like that, just sort of slipping all that in there so that anybody that's reading this that is potentially wanting to hire me can see that I'm hitting these keywords, so they know that I sort of know what I'm talking about to a degree, right? And then under that, I've got my game implementation reel. I've already showed 2 of the clips, so I'm not going to play this again, but similarly with this, I went into detail underneath, very brief detail with timestamps, and you know, similarly discussing industry standard stuff that I used. So I mentioned Wise. I throw in fancy words like low pass and stuff like that, and all that. You know, the most basic words that they can see and go, oh, he sort of knows, maybe. So that's kind of the main gist of it. And if you do end up doing game jams and like any group projects and stuff, then, or even single projects in Unreal or any engine that you want, really, this is a perfect place to show it. You can put it in the same video if you want as your linear reel, but I like to split them because I think it gets a bit cluttered otherwise, and I don't want people having to sit through like 4 minutes in a single video. I want to give them a little breather. So I've also got a little tab with my game projects. I also just really want to quickly say as well, I haven't updated this in like a year. Right? I'm pretty sure I last worked on this in like January of 2022. I shouldn't be telling you that, but it's great because even though I'm now in the industry, I haven't changed it, so it's not like you're seeing all of my current stuff. This is how it was basically when I left university or a little bit later. So So again, video, description, just talking about the most basic stuff. And this project kind of fell through. It never went anywhere. But even though it fell through, I still had content for it, which there's not really a whole lot going on. And it's all placeholder stuff. But I'm showing that I can use Wise in a bit more detail with this video. And this is really cool because I've just got it on the website, even though the game doesn't exist, it never happened. But there was enough of my content and me like learning to do stuff that I justified putting it on. And it also kind of shows if you've got work in progress stuff, it shows that you are actively doing something, right? So having that on there is useful as well. So don't feel intimidated if your work isn't perfect and if it isn't finished. You can still show it off, treat it like a demo, right? Because people still want to see it. And then I've actually got the other games from the shortened clip on the front page, but this time I have just kind of stuck them on as separate longer videos. So for anybody that wants to watch long videos, they can. I doubt it, but that's why they're sort of on a different page out of the way. And then I've also got some music stuff on here as well, which I won't play because SoundCloud comes out at like 4,000 decibels. But this is where I'm just showing off some of my music that I did for some projects and also just like my own kind of personal songs. Super brief information. And then I have got some game jam stuff on here actually, but no videos. And also, perfect place to link the project. So if anybody is curious enough to play it, which so far I think I've only had 2 people play that game jam, which is more than I was anticipating, but still, if they want to, they can play it and it's there. And then just kind of more demos. Again, show your demos. Show all of your demos. And then if you do eventually get around to finishing them, then you can put the proper things on. But I'm pretty sure like all of these, yeah, I never finished all of these. They are still work in progress, as I haven't given up. I'm just very busy. So if you are a musician as well as a sound designer, definitely show off your music. I'll probably mention it now while I'm here, but when I moved over to the audio department at Dan Buster, I knew that I was going to be a sound designer. That was the whole point of it, but I had no clue that they were going to ask me to do some music. And the only reason they asked me to do music was because they'd seen my portfolio and they knew that I could do music. Like, it was as simple as that. And one of my first tasks I actually got was to do a really short, like, kind of radio song for the game. And it's super basic, but it's still a piece of music. And they still trusted me on like my second week in audio to make a piece of music, which is a big thing because usually in AAA studios, music and sound design are split. They don't normally get the same people to work on the same thing. So just be considerate about that if you do have any form of music skills, or likewise if you're a musician that wants to get into games and you have any form of sound design skills, then showing off both is huge. Like, you're putting yourself ahead of most people. And then also like a little about me section. I never land on the about me section because I don't really want people to look at my grubby face. I want people to see my work straight away. So again, I haven't really updated this. So yeah, 1.5 years, I think. But just sticking some basic stuff on, like talking about my workflow, and like now that I think about it, this is kind of what I put on my resume, but in a little more detail on the resume. So the reason I've got this on here is just kind of as a little recap for them, or if somebody has found my website but not gone through my resume or through my CV or whatnot, then they can find this information about me. And it's cool to show off your hobbies and stuff. And if you've got a pet rabbit, you can put that on there as well. And then contact details as well is a really good thing. So the long-winded answer is, as a sound designer, we are very limited with where we can put our content. We don't really have an art station, unfortunately, or an equivalent, so making a website is super beneficial. And I personally think when I see somebody that has a website that is a sound designer, it makes me a bit more interested in them. It kind of goes like a longer way, and I sort of see that and I go, right, they're serious about this. It's not just a YouTube video. They have got an actual website. So I would say that that's probably quite a big thing. 2 seconds. So we come to the end of university. I finished with a degree, just about. I had a portfolio, which we've just gone over, and something that was really cool about that portfolio as well was I got advice from industry professionals. I'm not going to tell you to go out there and just start messaging people on Twitter, because I know a lot of developers don't like that, and I sort of get that, but I think if you kind of go through the correct channels, so in this case there's a Into Games Discord, which is really useful, and that's kind of a community of developers where you can basically chat to them, and they're all there for the same reason. They want to interact with people. You know, you've got students and people wanting to get in, and then your devs, and anyone can just have a conversation. So I got some incredible feedback on the actual portfolio content itself from from various developers. And funnily enough, one of the developers that gave me feedback is now my boss. And I think, again, just putting yourself out there and being like, yeah, you know, here's my work, can I get some feedback on it? You never know. That person might end up being your boss. And also a really, really big one, coming all the way back to the group projects, is future industry connections. And the projects that I've shown, the group projects, were worked on by my friend Dan, and Dan landed a job at Dambuster straight out of university. He got a QA position immediately, like maybe within the first 2 weeks after finishing, and he eventually referred me because we've worked together. He trusts me, I think, maybe. So he put me forward, referred me, and that's how I got to where I got. But before that, the hard part is applying for jobs. This is genuinely horrendous, I found at least. It's not fun, it is very tedious, and you're going to get rejected loads, like a lot. It happens. I was getting rejected, I think, because my portfolio, for starters, was kind of, it wasn't up to the standard that it was at then. So again, it was a bit more, everything was clumped into one longer video, which I think wasn't getting a lot of views because it was such a long video. I guess as well, I hadn't really got the feedback from the industry professionals at this point. So after I'd finished, I was kind of going to the like Discord servers and like chatting with the devs, and that was when I was getting feedback. So, you know, if you do get that, act on it, and that's going to be really good. And just constantly working on portfolios, just non-stop. It's a grind, but just keep putting content out there, even if it's small bits, even if it's demos, even if it's, you know, a 30-second long song, put it out there. Because, again, people are going to want to hear it, and it just shows that you're committed to what you're doing. It shows that you care about that, and it shows that you want to go somewhere. You know, you're not just doing it for the sake of it. You are really pushing yourself. And also, like, a few little things about applying. Research the companies that you're applying for. Be really, really mindful about kind of the company's information, their history. If you can find out what games have developed in the past, then you can talk about that on your cover letter. You know, there's definitely been a few of my friends, when they've applied for Dambuster, they've definitely slipped in like, oh yeah, you know, I used to play Time Splitters back in the day, which is one of the games of the former company before Dambuster. But you see stuff like that all the time, and I mean, it's fine. It's a good thing to do. It shows that you have actually researched a company, and it shows that you know their history. And also, then in the other kind of aspect of it, it's really important to figure out if they do like internal opportunities. So a lot of studios don't, from what I kind of find. I can't really give an exact number, but a lot of places aren't really going to have opportunities for you to move department to department, which for me, as a QA tester, wasn't great because I didn't want to stay in QA. That's not my interest at all. But I did end up getting lucky because there was an external application, but you know, Dambuster doesn't always do internal hires, so kind of be mindful about that. If you find any information about that, then you can always apply for a different position there and take like a, you know, be it like a horizontal move, or even if it's from QA to dev, it's still a possibility, but try not to kind of read it wrong and just assume that if you get QA, for example, at a studio, you're going to get promoted to like a dev role in, you know, in a year. It doesn't always happen. And there are people at Dambuster that have been stuck in QA, and you know, that's kind of their choice, or it's not. It's just how it goes. It's a look of the draw. But the last thing you want, if you really want to get a dev role, is try not to, you know, try not to put yourself into that position where you're trapped and you can't get out. And also be active on social media. So just a few quick resources here where you can find game jobs. You've got Hitmarker, Games Jobs, Direct, ArtStation if you're an artist. I just thought I'd sort of chuck that on there. But they do have, you'll occasionally see if you go on like the kind of the jobs section, you will see they will have audio jobs, but it's far and, you know, like few and far in between. You know, through studio websites as well. If you know game studios and you kind of research them, you might find that if you go on their website, they might have a position open. And, you know, that's one way of doing it. Through friends as well, I haven't mentioned that on the slide, but really important, you know, your mates from uni or college or wherever, if they end up in the industry, they might be able to get you in, as was my case. And so you've also got community discords, as I mentioned as well. Stuff like Into Games, I think they have, I want to say they've got a section where you can advertise like work for indie projects. So Discord servers is a good one. But yeah, you're going to get rejected loads. And it's just how it goes. But don't feel disheartened. You know, don't give up, is what I'll say. Just because you get rejected 10, 20, 30 times doesn't mean that that is it. You know, every time you get rejected, you will hopefully keep pushing and keep changing things. And that's what I did. I realized, okay, I'm getting rejected. What am I doing wrong? I wasn't getting any feedback either. Like, the people rejecting me weren't telling me what I was doing wrong, so I didn't know. But that's why I've got like the kind of the Discord servers on here, and I've got the like social media sort of side of things. People will give you feedback on social media if you post your work, you know, and that's what kind of happened with me. Is I just kind of kept the ball rolling, and I just kind of kept pushing and pushing and getting feedback, which is so crucial. And then eventually a position opened up at Dan Busters for QA. So my friend Dan referred me. Thank you very much, Dan. As I said, he'd landed the job before me, and he kind of put me in as a good word and got an interview. Not to say that that's why I got the job. I'm not necessarily implying here that if you know the right person, you're guaranteed a job. But because I kind of skipped that early stage of filtering, they went, yeah, okay, he's been referred, we'll give him a chance. And then I demonstrated my skills, and I guess they liked me. They gave me the job. But I wasn't interested in QA, I'm still not. I'm interested in it from the aspect of, if you go into QA, you're going to be a really good developer when you move to a developer position, because you've got that like different kind of view of it. But I wouldn't stay in QA, not for me at least. But I knew that it would be a foot in the door. And so I extensively researched Dan Busters and tried to get as much information as I could about like the project and stuff from Dan without him breaking NDA, and just sort of slipped all of that into my application. I will show my application that I did, my CV shortly, but that was for the audio position, but I promise not a lot changed. But yeah, I knew they were making Dead Island. That was one thing that was on their website, as it said, we're working on the next installment in the Dead Island franchise, and I thought, well, that kind of fits everything I like doing. I like making sound design for like gory things and loud things and punchy things and first-person things, and that's what Dead Island is. So it was kind of, the seed had been planted that if I got to Dan Busters as QA, you know, and I sort of kept grinding for it, something might come of it. So if you do decide to go through QA, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn so much about the industry from a different angle that a lot of devs don't have. I would probably argue that people that go through QA are better developers, like genuinely, because of that different angle that you see stuff from. You know, you're learning about how to debug a game. That's something that not a lot of people have, and you're also learning to understand how systems work. So when it comes to actually fixing bugs, you kind of have a really good insight of what might be wrong. You know, it's just invaluable. And it's also, like, it's literally you're in a AAA company, even if it's not for a AAA company. In my instance, I was literally in AAA. So just consider that. If that's, you know, if you're getting rejected a lot and you can't get a position in, like, directly in the role you want, then consider QA, because it is viable for sure. But non-stop applying as well. during this period. You know, I was applying for every audio job that came up, and I was also chatting with all the sound designers. And as I mentioned, my boss, he gave me feedback. He gave me more feedback, like even more feedback than before, and a bit more personalized because I kind of worked in the same studio. So I was going out on Fridays to the pub and would chat about sound design and stuff. And I was like, damn, these guys are really cool. I actually really like these guys. Like not as like professionals. I'm like, damn, these people are really cool. And so I felt really comfortable around them and comfortable around this sort of idea of if I was working with these guys, then, you know, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good. And so then, after, I think it was 6 months in QA, which isn't a long period of time in the grand scheme of things, a position opened up for audio dam busters. One of the guys had left a few months prior, and the opportunity came up, and I kind of went for it. I applied. And so what was really important with this is because I knew the developers, I knew the project, and I'd spoken directly to the sound designers about the project, and they'd given me feedback. They'd already seen my work. They knew what they were getting into. They kind of, you know, gave me an interview just kind of off the bat, and that was amazing. And then came the design test, which I'll show in a second. And then second interview, basically the same process as QA, to be fair, 2 interviews. And then I found out I got the job. So I feel like that shouldn't have frozen, but it has. So give it a moment. Oh, that's wonderful. That's not supposed to do that. Okay. That's actually quite interesting. You know what? I am just going to go onto Vimeo and find it. Bear with me. This happens. It's real. It's live. Right. How do I search? I need to find. I need to find myself on Vimeo. Is that it there? Never mind. That's for Microsoft. God damn it. Let's try Chrome. This might be the one. Okay, I don't know how to find videos on Vimeo. So as I was saying earlier about using Vimeo as a platform to host videos, maybe don't. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what to do about that. I don't think I've got that locally anywhere, unfortunately. Guys at the back, do you have any suggestions? I mean, it might be. That would be a good shout. Oh, does not like this. That's great. That's not good. I mean, it's fine. I can kind of talk about it, but it's a bit dry if I don't have the actual content to show. I don't think I actually uploaded it onto my portfolio because I haven't updated this in like a year and a half. So again, update your portfolios. That's really, really, really important because things like this will happen. Like genuinely, I'm not even kidding. I'm also pretty sure I stopped using Twitter a while ago as well, and I'm pretty sure I lost a bunch of demos and stuff that I'd uploaded specifically to that because of that. So try and keep your work localized, and you know, under all circumstances, if you can, try to make it super easy to access. But it's fine that we can't play it, but what I was pretty much just going to say was the style of sound design for that test. For those of you who know your games, it was Deathloop and then a cinematic from The Witcher 3. Now, I haven't played either of those games, if I'm honest. I'll just sort of say that, as it were. You know, I don't know them, I'm not familiar with them, but I sort of looked at the test. Again, it had no audio as well. Another good reason why it's good to sort of test yourself without listening to the audio is because in most situations, if you get a design test for audio, it probably won't have the audio already on it because they don't really want you to try and copy it. They want your style. Your employers want to hear your style. They want to hear your personality. And so it was perfect for me because with my portfolio, I did all of that stuff. You know, it met all of the criteria, the punchiness, the viscerality, if that's even a word, you know, all of that like crazy stuff, like the loudness and the first person aspect of it and all of that. But it also, funnily enough and conveniently enough, fit Dead Island 2, which was really convenient because it kind of came full circle that I had done all this like portfolio content with like this kind of certain style in mind, started working at the studio, then when they wanted to hire me, my sound design happened to match what they wanted. And so this is like such a good, again, the video would have made it a bit more clearer, but it's why it's so important to develop a style and lean into that style and demonstrate that you are like really, really good. Like not like one specific thing, like not just a single thing, but like demonstrate you are really good at doing a style, you know, properly demonstrate that. And in the video that I did, I think it was like one of my best sound design pieces. That, you know, that kind of came out perfectly. It's actually so good that it just can't play. I literally, it's that good, I can't show you guys. So kind of moving on, just want to quickly talk about the boring side of things. I do apologize. You've still got me for another bit of time. So where to start? Well, in terms of content, it's incredibly standard. It's all resumes need to have like your personal profile, your skills, all that stuff. There's nothing special about this apart from I've expanded heavily in my cover letter section over here. Again, I'm not going to ask you to read it, but I've basically expanded my key skills in this and my projects in this. So I'm like discussing my software that I use. I am discussing my workflow, so like field recording, and I also mentioned my music experience. Sorry for those of you that can't see that. And then I'm kind of also discussing a little bit about, somewhere around here, I was discussing a little bit about the projects in a bit more detail, but the main thing is try and keep it standard. Try and keep it as standard as possible, but put a bit of a theme in there if you can, like I've done, but that shouldn't be the priority. I would say, like, as everyone says, keep it standard, keep it concise, but substance over style. Like, it's nice to demonstrate that you've got personality in your resume and in your cover letter, but if it's hard to read, then, well, you've, you know, you've made a big mistake. So with mine, as well, with like the whole kind of keeping it easy to read, the font is a readable size for the most part. There's no obstruction of text, like there's no hard to read bits in it, I don't think, at least. And I'm terrible at reading. But there's also not really any blank space. That's another really important thing, and I filled the entire page. So just keep that in mind. And I think if you can go to the NTU employability team, they can give you some really good advice. Also, if you are a sound designer, definitely talk about your main software that you use. That's like, I mean, it's a given, it's really important. Discuss that, really go into detail about that. Talk about, you know, your favorite workstation, talk about your workflows, your plugins that you use. And another thing that's really incredibly important is hit all the keywords that are on the application page. Try and hit all of the keywords, because when you're applying, they're going to kind of like read over that. Some places actually have this like automatic system where it scrubs over your resume, and it will like try and detect any keywords, and if it doesn't, then it kind of like gets put to a certain pile. There's like the disregard. I don't know if that's like an actual myth or not, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, it's a thing. So when you're reading the application, it says like they want this, this, this. Mention you can do this, 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 and be confident about it. Be like, you know, I have this, 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 these skills, because you're showing that you can do what the application wants. Also, just another thing as well, definitely put your qualifications on it, but don't be surprised that studios don't really, I don't want to say they don't care about experience from like college and university. It's something that they don't focus on. Like, it's not like engineering where if you've got an engineering degree, they go like, yes, we're going to hire you. With the games industry, it's more a case of if you are good at what you do and you can demonstrate you're good at what you do, they're going to pick you regardless of if you got a first or, you know, you didn't even go to university. But it definitely helps because you've got the connections and you've got the facilities here as well. So eventually, after a long month of interviews and sound design tests, they picked me. And then the rest is history. What I will quickly say before I discuss my day-to-day as well is that with your or with this resume and cover letter, not a lot changed from when I applied for QA. The resume itself was basically the same, apart from I'd replaced the key skills section. I'd replaced that with my kind of QA experience I had from college. So if you are in college level and you are on the games course, you're probably going to have a module that has a bit of QA, maybe even on the uni level. I'm not 100% on that, but if you apply for QA and you've kind of gone through that channel, that's a great thing to talk about, and that's what I did talk about. And the actual cover letter itself has changed as well, because again, I didn't really have my music or my my sound design experience on this, but you know, it's you have to tailor it. You have to kind of tailor it to be specific, and make sure you're addressing who you need to address. So a little bit about my day-to-day. I'm just going to grab some water because my voice is starting to go. Oh. Say again, sorry? It should be called, great question. Can I come over and have a look? I think we've done it. I think we have done it. I have kind of already gone over the points of what I wanted to talk about with the video, but if we can get it playing, then it'll still be nice to show. Thank you very much. For those of you who are interested with the actual sound design side of that, I'll quickly kind of just mention a few things then. So with a lot of the impacts that you heard there, most of those were done, funnily enough, in my garden. It was raining, and after like the rain had stopped, I'd basically pounded the grass with hammers, like a sledgehammer and a spade and stuff like that. It makes an incredible impact sound because it's kind of got like a slight wet squelch to it. So I use that for most of the content there because, again, a lot of it just kind of had like hits in it. So that was great for that. The ambience that you heard in the background was all just kind of like recorded stuff that was done, again, in my garden. There's like kind of a theme here, which is a lot of my stuff I record in my garden, which I hadn't really thought about. but I guess I just like recording outdoors. I just quite like that. But that was all recorded on the field recorder that I'd bought in second year, and the microphones I'd bought in second year. It was just equipment that I still had and still used because, you know, you buy it for life. Some of the more like stylized elements in there, like the kind of the sound of the body doing that like thing, that was done with a plugin called FabFilter Saturn, which is kind of, it's a distortion, a multi-band distortion, but you can modulate it, so you can kind of make it sound really just like weird and just kind of synthesize you almost. And so that's how I got that sound. I played with a lot of reverbs as well and delays to get the correct kind of spatial sounds. So for the outdoor bits on like The Witcher and the start of the Deathloop bit, that was all done with just like the stock Reaper delay plugin. I love using that. You know, you just stick like a long 200-300 millisecond delay on with a bit of like kind of slap back, and it just sorts you out for your outdoor ambience. And those are kind of the main things from that. But again, you sort of, I hope you could kind of hear from that I was really leaning into that style that I developed, that whole like super punchy, visceral style. And that was a blind test as well, and that's the one that they picked. It was their favorite out of, I think, 5 people. And so the style that I developed had suited what they wanted to do perfectly. And so, gone a bit far there. So my day-to-day, honestly right now, I can say that it is a little bit dry because of where we're at with the project. So Dead Island 2 is releasing, I don't know how many days it is, but it's like end of April is when it's releasing, the 21st. And so, you know, we've gone gold now. We can't really do much. We can't really change things, add new sounds or anything. So I've got up here that I do recording and editing of sounds, and that's true. I do a lot of editing, more than recording, to be fair. Sound libraries, like I mentioned earlier, are really useful because we pull from them all the time. Like, we have a bunch of sound libraries, and we use those for most of our sound design. Like, we grab our different library content and we stick those in to like our workstations, and then we edit the content. We don't really use like the content from the actual libraries as raw content. We like to just kind of edit them, but use it as a base. So I do a lot of editing, and as it currently stands, like, we're past implementation as well for the most part, so we're not really, you know, we're not putting new stuff in Engine, but again, super important to mention using Wise, the middleware, and Unreal Engine. Like, most of my time when it comes to implementing stuff is going to be on either the Wise side or Unreal side. And so if you have experience using Unreal Engine, even if it's a tiny amount, and even if you're not really that good at it, it's still really useful. You know, you can talk about that. And I think something that a lot of sound designers don't do is they don't learn how to use game engines. You know, if you come from like a film background, for example, you don't really have that context. You don't really have a reason to start learning how to use game engines. So definitely, if you get the chance, please check out like Unreal Engine if you haven't already, and just kind of learn the very basics. And that will go a long way, because if you end up working somewhere that uses Unreal Engine, or even any game engine, which you'd hope if it's a game studio, you'd kind of be in a position where you know more than, you know, most people applying, I'd argue. But right now, a bunch of bug fixing is going on, which is, again, why my experience in QA was so valuable, because now because I have that different angle on the project, I understand the inner workings of it from a QA perspective. I understand how to find issues. Like, I'm able to listen back to the game when I'm playing it and I'm testing it, and I can actually hear things that I think are bugs that other people might not have spotted, because I've got both the audio experience and the QA experience. So, you know, it feels kind of nice to be able to go, that is broken, that is definitely broken, you know, I know that's broken, that sounds broken, and then it gets fixed. So yeah, lots of bug fixing. And bug fixing, for us, typically, again, almost all of it is going to be in Unreal Engine or in the middleware. Most of the stuff that we get come through will be stuff like sounds aren't properly triggering, and that it's very specific to the individual issue. But we do have we kind of have a proper process for fixing that stuff, and you pick it up pretty quick. You know, especially if you worked on the sound as well. If you put the sound in, you can typically know what's gone wrong with it, because it's kind of your area that you've worked on, and because of where the project's at, lots of optimization. And other than that, we get occasional like journalist shoots, which is really fun. So because we kind of went public a few months ago, we had Game Informer magazine come in and do some video shoots, and I'm in like 10 seconds of footage, which is awesome. Like, I'm actually in a Game Informer video. Like, it's amazing. So stuff like that. And then you get opportunities like this where you get to talk to students, and I think it's really cool. So other than that, things you can be doing right now at this moment: creating and updating a portfolio. Probably I'd argue the most important thing. Be on top of it, keep working on your portfolio. Offline networking, as I said, talk to your classmates, try and find people that you want to work on group projects with, do game jams, you know, because when it comes to it and you do get into the industry or trying to get into the industry, networking is kind of terrifying, for me at least. Like, I am very much, you know, I'm not great when it comes to like formal communication with people. I like to be a bit informal, a bit like chill, but proper networking can be a bit, you know, extraneous sometimes. I'm not going to lie. So being able to offline network, as I've called it, just literally chatting to your classmates or meeting people through game jams, that's going to give you so much confidence, and that's going to allow you to go out into the real world and meet proper game devs, and you've just got that confidence there. And similarly with networking, being active on social media and in communities is really important, as I've already gone over multiple times. And I'm not going to say it again, but develop your game engine skills. Research your software and your hardware. It's really important. You know, if you'll sort of find that certain softwares, like for example Reaper, which is the one that I use, the workstation is used by most of the guys at Dambuster, and so it kind of works nicely. It's like a good workflow for us because we use the same software. But when it comes to audio software in the industry, with like your actual workstation, there's a million different ones, and so many people use different stuff. We have a bunch of, well, two of the sound designers use a Nuendo, that's their main one, and the other three are on Reaper. And then, like, I know some people in the industry that use Cubase for whatever reason. I like Cubase. No offense to anyone that uses Cubase, but like, you know, there's certain workstations that I think lean a bit more towards game audio, and so Reaper is a really good one, and you can technically get it for free, legally get it for free. And if you don't actually really feel comfortable with that, then Audacity is a great shout anyways. You know, in your current point in time, use it, it's free. You don't really have any excuses. Like, you don't have any excuses at all. And with the hardware side of things, if you can't justify buying a field recorder, Confetti literally has a bunch of Zoom handheld field recorders that you can book. Please use those if that's what you want to do. They're there for you to use. They're there for you to book out and record sounds with. So use that, you know, and use the Foley room as well. I actually haven't been in the Foley room here before. I'm pretty sure it exists. I think it's real. I've heard it's real. Use that as well. So other than that, that is all. So do we have any questions at all? Do you want to go first?
I was going to ask, in terms of learning-wise, did you learn that in uni, or did you teach yourself? And like when you got the job, how much of wise did you know how to use?
So at that point, when I'd first like picked it up, would have been in third year of uni. It would have been for the project that I was working on, where I wanted to do like the dynamic music. I think. Well, I started off, that wasn't in uni when like we were kind of told that. It was fully self-taught, but that was like the first time I'd used it, and basically that was kind of the only time I'd used it prior to like working at Dambuster. So I didn't really have a lot of experience, to be honest with it. I just knew the basic of the music side of things in it, like the basic way you can use RTPCs is what they're called, which is where the game communicates with Wise, and that is how it kind of tells it what parameters to change. So I'd only got the very bare basics down. And when I actually started at Dambuster, we use, I mean, like Wise it's massive in terms of like what you can do. There's a lot of stuff, and I knew like 2% of it, so I didn't know a whole lot, and I wasn't very comfortable with it, if I'm honest. But what was great is because I was a junior, that was like the position I got hired as, I kind of got taught it. Like, they pretty much told me how to learn it in a specific way. And I think you'll find that as well, is if you're not 100% confident with software that you use, or with what the studio use even, they're probably going to teach you how to use it. And especially with stuff like Unreal, because most studios, like AAA at least, use a custom integration where stuff's slightly different to like the base versions, you'll find that you're going to have to be taught it anyways. So I would say, like, are you wanting to like learn Wise?
Yeah, I'm like doing a module where we kind of use it a little bit, but I'm not, still don't know how to use it properly.
Yeah, I would say if we'll just self-teach first and foremost, in the sense of just get hands-on with it. And I would also say, like, a really good one is find resources on YouTube. I kind of wish I would have like put some on. It's called I Dream of Wise. It's a YouTube channel. Oh, nice, getting a microphone. But yeah, check out I Dream of Wise. Those guys are really good. They do stuff, and like the actual Wise YouTube channel, or the Audio Kinetic YouTube channel, has content on it, and they'll kind of walk it through. Yeah, Wise it's difficult, but it's great to learn. I mean, did that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want to go next?
I basically wanted to ask a question about like your workflow and how you sort of come to make the sounds, because if you see something in game, you know that you've got an impact or something. Like, how do you like? What's your initial process into going what to do to make the right sound that you want to basically match with the gameplay?
Well, first and foremost, I think it depends on where you are in the project. So if we're talking about like with the redesign stuff, you've got the benefit of it already exists. Like the video is there, it's done. It's like the kind of the mastered video of a game that you can look at. And so with that, you've got the visual, and the first thing that my mind goes to with that is I look at it and I think, what can I do, obviously, to like fill the space? So it's kind of a difficult question, because I don't really try to focus on sound design for like one individual asset when it comes to that like kind of level of it. I typically will focus on the kind of bigger picture, and I like to layer it up. So I'll start with stuff like the ambience, and then I'll put the various like layers on that go onto the ambience. So like I typically have on my tracks, I can have up to like 4 layers of ambience, and I just kind of try and fill the mix out and do some like kind of balancing. When it comes to actually like the workflow itself of recording a sound, like also like I guess sort of like from start to finish. If we're talking about an impact, for example, I would typically start by basically just messing about with a bunch of things that sound punchy. That's how I found out to go out in the rain and slam a sledgehammer into my garden. Like I just kind of thought, well, you know, it's a sledgehammer. I think something that's not really talked about a lot is like the energy of a sound. So microphones are pretty good at picking up the actual energy. You know, it's like the same as when somebody is screaming in like a game, like as a voice actor, you can tell that they're not actually screaming sometimes, because you can just tell, you know, you can tell when something has that like power behind it, that energy. And so I think with stuff like impact sound effects, you want to try and judge how much energy that thing needs. With like the clip that we just played, I needed something that was like just hard hitting and, you know, needed to be exaggerated. Like a lot of stuff in that genre of like first person is really exaggerated. It's just very much over the top. And so first and foremost, for that stuff, I need to find a sound source that just has a massive thump to it, like a big hit. And then I will go in with some like EQ. I'll take out some frequencies, like especially like the very, very kind of like woofy frequencies, like at the bottom, like 100 hertz. It's good, and you want that in there. Like you want the kind of the full spectrum. But I do find with stuff like that, it can be a bit overbearing sometimes. So balancing the sound, and then layering it is another really important one. So finding other things to put it with. So with some of the impacts that you heard, I'd also layered them with I had like a spatula, like a metal spatula, and I was like slamming that into a towel, which gave me both the kind of like the whoosh of the kind of the spatula blade cutting the air just for a brief moment, and then also like a higher pitched impact. So like layering that, and then sticking on some like visceral sound of like an orange being squelched. And that sort of thing, right, it's 3 sounds, and it sounds massive, but it sounds massive because you've got 3 sounds, like you're layering it, and you're just kind of putting all that energy into one thing. So kind of like, long story short, my workflow for that would be to find a good sound source, record it, layer it, process it. I mean, processing it after recording as well, just like constantly processing it with EQ and compression as well. And then once you go from there, if it's for like a linear redesign, like the videos, then you just kind of have to put it on and listen to it and just see how it sounds in the context, see how it works. And that's why, as I said, I like to start with the ambience. I like to just sort of go from there and kind of put stuff in and see how it sounds. And so like when I had that sound in, the impact, I had to change it a few times. I don't think it actually started out as the sledgehammer hitting the grass. It started out as I think it was a garden fork that I hit the grass with, and I just found that it was a bit too high-pitched, and I wanted a bit more thump. So then I switched to a sledgehammer. So again, it's kind of a back and forth. It's you try something, and then you go, I don't think that works. And another thing that I like to do as well is I like to put too many layers onto a sound and then try and kind of peel it back. I don't know if that's like the right way that people actually do it, but I always find myself recording way too many things and having like 7, 8 layers on a single sound, and then listening back and I'm like, there's way too much going on. And then like you start to kind of peel the layers away and get it a bit more refined. So I kind of like to work backwards with that sort of thing. When it comes to games, it's a bit more tricky because games are at different stages. You know, when I started on Dead Island, the game was pretty much already in a visually completed place, and most of the story, narrative context, art context was already there for me. But I imagine if the game was just grey box, if it was just at the very beginning of the project, it'd be a lot more difficult to do sound design for that because you don't necessarily know what you're designing the sound for. You've just got a loose idea. So with stuff like that, concepting is really important, and that's why you need to just iterate. You just need to kind of go through it and just keep trying different things over and over.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, what audio libraries would you recommend for cases where you can't record the thing that you want, or like you don't have a sledgehammer to stick in your backyard?
Wait, you're telling me not everyone has a sledgehammer? Like, what? Come on, like, free or paid?
Preferably free.
Yeah. I think it depends what you want to do with it. So if you want to use it commercially, there are some, I need to get the name of this up. I know Boom Library, like literally BOOM, they do some free offers every now and then where you can get some of their like sound effects. You have to like sign up for the mailing list, and they'll kind of email a sort of very select few sounds from a bigger library. But Boom are the ones that I mostly use at work and I use at home for stuff like weapons, which are a bit harder to record in this country. I'm trying to find it now because there is a really good resource for sound libraries. The main reason I'm trying to find this is because stuff like free sound or like free sound library is fine if you're using it for like a uni project, but it gets into like that legal kind of grey area where you can't always use the sounds commercially. So if you're wanting to like release a project, that might become a bit difficult. I really can't remember the name, unfortunately, but I would say research free sound libraries and try and find royalty-free ones just to kind of get comfortable with that. The idea of like having a library that you can just use for commercial stuff, not so much for like making money, but just like for releasing. And as well, when it comes to like libraries, I think I try not to use too many. It's what you've got access to at the end of the day. If you don't have access to all the stuff, all of the little bits, then it's fine to use a library. But I would say try to avoid just pulling straight from a library and just sticking it into a game. I'd say try and do like a little bit of processing to it, because again, coming back to his question, it's kind of this whole thing of iterating. It's like you try something out and then you go, I don't think that works, that sounds really bad. And then you try again. But so many people will just like grab stuff from sound libraries and then just like trim it and just stick it in and be like done. So yeah, be mindful about that. And again, like I would say my work when I'm actually doing sound design at work is probably like 40% I start with a library as opposed to like recording everything. Again, I would prefer to record everything. It's just kind of how it goes with like the setup we've got. But the difference is we have hundreds of commercial libraries, right? We have like access to anything we need. So even though that we have access to all that stuff, we still have to edit it all. We still have to kind of grab the bits and chop it up and process it in different ways. So I'm sorry I couldn't have like a more specific, clear-cut answer on that. But yeah, just kind of research, and there are definitely some good ones. but don't feel bad for using stuff from like My Free Sounds or anything like that.
Yeah. I think on the topic of recording as much as you can, what's the sound quality like on the microphones for the field recorders that like come with it, not the separate one that you got, for example?
They're not too bad. It depends what you get. So the ones that Confetti have, I believe they have the Zoom H4Ns, I think is a model that we have here, or at least ones you can book out. Those are not bad. They've got like a stereo mic setup in what's called an XY configuration, so they kind of cross over. So they're good for recording anything from like ambience, where you need the stereo soundscape, to just kind of sticking it on like a watermelon and smashing it, you know. So you've got kind of a good range of sound you can capture from it, compared to like the microphones that I bought. So the microphones that I bought in second year, I got a shotgun mic, which is a longer mic, and that allows you to get more like focused sound sources without having the kind of external noise. And I needed that because my house, frankly, sounds shit. Like, it sounds really bad. The rooms reverberate so badly, and so like a shotgun mic is great for that because you're isolating your sound source. That's like one type of microphone I'd say every sound designer should have, is a shotgun or a rifle mic, if you can get one. They're not literally shotguns or rifles, but they are like really long. I also got some small diaphragm condenser microphones. They're like really tiny things, but the actual, I'm pretty sure I want to say that the Zoom H4N does have small diaphragm microphones on. It's just the ones that I bought were a little bit nicer. In terms of sound quality, they are really good. I don't know what the sample rate is. I think it goes up to like 96K, which is plenty for like recording. And you know, like most of my stuff I export in 48K, so it's like half of that anyways. So it's not, you know, you're not going to be limited by the digital like reproduction of those recorders, and the actual microphones I think are pretty good on them. But like the ones the field recorder I have at home, the Tascam one, similarly stereo pair of mics, but it doesn't sound great. And I think it's because it is like a bit of an older model, and it's kind of a bit, you know, just a bit naff.
Do you remember how much it cost?
It cost me, I think, £80, I want to say, 80 or 90 pounds about. It was battered, you know. You'd probably end up paying a bit more for a nicer one, but I don't really mind that sort of stuff. I like just cheap stuff. And the shotgun microphone, I want to say cost maybe 80, but it is a nice one. It's what is it? I think it's a Sennheiser. I believe it's a Sennheiser. So it's a nice quality mic, and I think when I bought it, I was using my maintenance loan, so classic. I pretty much decided, like, if I'm going to buy something, it needs to be not too expensive, but it needs to be something that's going to last me, and I still use it. Like, I literally still use it now, even though I'm a professional. So, you know, I tried to look at it like that, right? I knew I was going to commit to it, and I was like, I'm doing this. I'm 100% going to go down this pathway so I can spend a bit more money. Cool. You all bored yet?
Okay, can we give a round of applause?
Thank you very much.